we're going to get right into it, and we're going to start off with them, Super Bowl champions, right? So life is pretty good for the, reigning Super Bowl champs at the moment, right? Sure, they had the league's reigning third-ranked defense in EPA allowed per play. I think they obviously have to replace a handful of key contributors who left in free agency, but most key parties remained from the squad, okay, that posted the NFL's second best point differential at plus 160 during the regular season last year. Now that bodes out to be the offense and the defense, right? That point differential is your offense scoring so many points and your defense only allowing a certain amount, right? Of course, that was then, and this is now. So today we're going to break down, some of the biggest, most fantasy-related questions facing the Birds ahead of 2025, okay? First, we're going to get right into it. Does Jalen Hurts have the safest floor of any fantasy quarterback, okay? All Hurts has done since taking over as Philly starter in 2021 is work as one of the league's single most productive players at the position. Okay. Hurts' fantasy points per game by season since 2021. He's been quarterback 6, quarterback 1, quarterback 2 in 2023, and last year quarterback 5. Okay. Now, of course, the rushing prowess, aka the tush push, right, is a big reason why. Hurts has scored double-digit touchdowns on the ground in each of the past 4 seasons. Cam Newton and Josh Allen, who have had 3 and 2 respectively, are the only other quarterbacks with multiple qualifying campaigns in NFL history. Okay, we're truly looking at a fantasy football cheat code here, guys. It is what it is. Turning 27 in August, there's really no reason to expect a physical decline from the reigning Super Bowl MVP anytime soon. Okay, while it might be a lot cooler if Hurts could get back to, 2022 heights, which was 250 passing yards per game, as opposed to 194 per game through the air in 2024. Any added explosiveness with his arm would simply be the cherry on the top of an already delicious fantasy Sunday, right? It just kind of pushes it over the edge there. Again, double-digit rushing touchdowns, guys. Those points add up. After all, Hurts joined Anthony Richardson and Justin Fields as the only quarterbacks with north of 40% of their fantasy production coming on the ground last season. Okay, so this is kind of where we see Jalen Hurts going in the 2025 season. So this is the outlook for Jalen Hurts. You don't need more than one hand to count the number of quarterbacks that you'd rather have in fantasy this year, right? Although the relative lack of passing ceiling in the Eagles' perennial run-first offense, we'll see how it does under Kevin Patullo. But I think it keeps Hurts, as of right now, until I see more passing game, it keeps him behind guys like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. It does. Fantasy-wise, it does. Okay? Going off of last season, the 194 yards per game just isn't pretty. Okay? It's not pretty when it comes to fantasy numbers. But when you're rushing for 2 to 3 touchdowns possibly in a game, or 2 to 3 rushing touchdowns over a slew of weeks even as a quarterback would be very productive. Okay, we're going to move on to Saquon Barkley and how Saquon could possibly be a bust in 2025 this season. Okay, from massive house calls to ridiculous jukes, and of course, hurdling finely tuned athletic machines backwards. Right? There's no getting around Barkley's status as the game's best running back after his incredible 2,000-yard campaign in 2024, right? Overall, his 125 rushing yards per game were a whopping 43.3 more than his previous career mark. Now, we knew that him going from the Giants to the Eagles was that next step. Right, but did I tell you that he was going to average 40 more yards per game? That's quite a stat. The 28-year-old really just signed a 2-year, $41 million extension this offseason, making him the highest paid running back in NFL history. Now, you throw in the reality that PFF's reigning top-ranked offensive line returns 4 out of the 5 starters, right? It's tough to poke really any hole in the profile of the arguably first overall pick of fantasy, right? Now, that said, there are 2 itty-bitty problems that could perhaps make Barkley look a bit more human in 2025. One of those is receiving volume, okay? Barkley averaged a career low 4.6 points per game as a pass catcher last season, which isn't a huge surprise considering the Eagles ranked 30th in total targets in the running back room as long as Hurts has been there in the 4 years. So Hurts is not a check down guy. Let's get that straight right now. He ranks 30th in the running back targets. Okay, keep that thought. Still, Barkley joined Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor as the most rushing-dependent running backs at the top of the position fantasy landscape last season. Okay, so again, where does his receiving volume come into play here? Now that we have A.J. Dillon, Will Shipley on a year 2, what does that look like for Barkley? Okay, now also, a big one, and this transpired last year and ate into a lot of his stats, was the goal line work. Okay, Hurts racked up the league's 3rd most rushing attempts inside the 5-yard line last season. 18. Barkley wasn't too far behind at 13. He was ranked 11th. But only 4 of those 13 were converted into touchdowns because Philly, isn't too fond of giving their running backs the rock on the 1-yard line, right? We all know what comes next. This resulted in Barkley getting all the way to the 1-yard line, only not to score a touchdown on the league high 9 occasions. 9. Okay. Now, you consider Eagle running backs are tied for last in carries from the 1-yard line at 13 since 2021. Imagine that. That's when Jalen Hurts got drafted. But easily first in rush attempts between the 2 and the 5-yard line at 78. So once they get down there, guys, it's it. That's what we do. Hey, these concerns were more valid, I think, than ever entering last season and didn't stop Barkley from finishing as the running back 1 in fantasy land, right? I think we had the same concerns last year. I think just realized that the ceiling would somehow be even higher in a sort of different scheme. I think if we up the passing game, Barkley is a very capable back out of the backfield in the receiving game. Okay, now if we do open up that pass game, it also opens up the play action. It also opens up holes for Barkley because now they have 2 facets of the game to play against. Okay, not just load the box against Barkley, right? So we're going to look at Barkley's fantasy football outlook for 2025. Okay, the likelihood that Barkley, again, combines around 400 combined carries and targets as of last year, it's up in the air if it's going to be that same production, right? I find the curse of 370, which we've already talked about, sort of studies the reference that running backs falling off after a year featuring a heavy workload, right? The data pool itself is a very small sample that usually ignores playoff touches and receiving work. Okay, the only reason why Saquon shouldn't be the running back 1 in fantasy football drafts of all shapes and sizes is the reality that Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs arguably project for similar volume, but are much younger. Okay, we have to realize that in these dynasty leagues, guys, that your guys are setting up, you're going to have this team year after year after year. You're going to want to draft the younger guys so that way you can keep the young talent, right? Okay, what we're going to get into now is the chances. What are the chances that A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith return to high-end fantasy value, right? So we talked about that passing game. That passing game's got to ramp up. Okay, nobody is debating the reality that Brown and Smith are absolute ballers, right? Shot callers. Just look at the company they kept last season in terms of the league's most efficient wide receivers at picking up yards and earning targets on a per route basis, okay? Anyway, everyone agrees Brown, who's 27, and Smith, 26, crazy to me that they're the same, almost the same age, are quite good at their jobs, right? According to PFF, they finished at wide receiver 12 and wide receiver 15 in points per game last year. Now, that's respectable. This was not the first time both managed to simultaneously put together quality seasons, obviously, although it was Smith's best per game finish since teaming up with A.J. Brown back in 2022, which is when they went to the Super Bowl. Okay. Now, Brown has finished in the top 12 for the 3 years that he's been in Philadelphia. Wide receiver 8, and then wide receiver 12 last year. Okay, Smith has had a little bit rougher road. His first year with AJ, he finished wide receiver 14. 2023 kind of had an off year, wide receiver 20, and then this last year went back up to, again, like we said, wide receiver 15. Wide receiver 1 production is expected from Brown at this point, right? But it's curious that Smith is just stuck outside the position's top 24 receivers in early average draft position, despite returning top 20 numbers in each of the past 3 seasons, like we just talked about, right? It'd be a lot cooler for either wide receiver to individually be the clear-cut featured number 1 pass game option. Just realize last season, A.J. Brown and Smith's combined 58% target share. Okay, so when Hurts is basically passing that ball, 80% of the time, he's either going to A.J. or DeVonta. That is what that means. Okay, so what do we think the fantasy outlook for A.J. Brown and DeVonta Smith will be for 2025? Don't get bored making a profit. Okay, A.J. Brown and Smith might not have the sort of gaudy 180-plus target ceilings that, talents of their caliber deserve. But the Eagles' run-first offense has to at least have condensed its passing game almost solely around them, right? Continue to treat Brown as the borderline wide receiver 1, okay? He should be a top 5 wide receiver taken off the board. He's been through, and he's been done this throughout his entire career, guys. While Smith continues to deserve that low-end wide receiver 2 treatment, okay? Next position is Dallas Goedert, poised to finally put together a boom year, okay? Now, there was a lot of smoke to the fire that Goedert could be traded prior to the draft, but here we are in May, and the 30-year-old veteran remains a member of the Birds after renegotiating his contract. Still, though, Goedert doesn't exactly project as someone for fantasy managers to get overly excited about. Injuries have caused the 7-year veteran to miss 15 games over the last 3 seasons, okay? And even his per-game fantasy numbers really haven't exactly been anything to call home about. Now, Goedert will go from borderline he will go from borderline tight end 1 territory to an arguably top 6 option at the position should either A.J. Brown or Smith miss time, right? Because that changes the landscape of the game. But the increase in age and the 2-year sample of good, not great production makes it tough to expect too much from him in 2025. Okay, so the expectations shouldn't be through the roof, guys. Again, we just said 80% of the balls that Jalen Hurts is throwing is either going to A.J. Brown or DeVonta Smith. Now, what do we see Dallas Goedert's outlook for 2025? Okay, I'm perfectly fine deploying a first or last strategy at tight end this season, thanks to the reality that guys like, Dallas Goedert, Jake Ferguson are currently ADP tight end 15 and tight end 17. But I struggle to see a true boom outcome for the Eagles, tight end without an injury occurring to one of the team's wide receivers. That's what this boils down to. Again, guys, we said that we would cover defense because most of these leagues have the defense, right? The defense and special teams. Okay, so is this the NFL's best defense? I'm wrecking Havoc. Havoc is a cool stat that is, defined as the percentage of plays where the defense got a pressure, tackle for a loss, an interception, a forced fumble, or a pass breakup. Basically anything that causes havoc, okay? The top 5 defenses in this metric last season were as follows. Broncos 1, Lions 2, Browns at 3. That was interesting when I read this. Eagles at 4, and the Vikings at 5. The one that surprised me there was the Browns. But not too shabby, although it remains to be seen if losing the front 7 difference makers like Brandon Graham, Josh Swelton, Milton Williams will be proved to be too much of an overcome. Okay, I do like Moro Ajomo. I do like Jalix Hunt. I like the guy they just drafted in Ty Robinson. Okay, I think the defensive line is just getting younger, and I think we just don't have that veteran presence anymore, and that'll be fine. We'll be fine. We have plenty of other veterans around the team. Okay, so what is the fantasy outlook of that? Being a top 4 defense scoring last year. Okay, so the fantasy's reigning 7th best defense has some work to do in order to replicate their typical dominance at the line of scrimmage, right? But I wouldn't count out defensive coordinator Vic Fangio. He's still figuring things out to a fairly high level, especially with all 5 of Philly's top draft picks going to the defensive side of the ball. Okay, Vic wanted some new toys. Jalen Carter's young. Nolan Smith is young. Got Nakobe Dean coming back from injury. We got Jahai Campbell. Okay, Vic wanted some new toys, so we'll see what he does with it. Okay, so what is our Philadelphia Eagles prediction for 2025? Okay, this again, and I say again, sure looks like a lot of one of the most complete teams in football. Let's be honest. Okay, it's according I put the Eagles joining the Bills, the Ravens, and I think that's it, as the only teams to have an 11.5 over win total ahead of next season. Okay, I don't think there's going to be a lot of 13-win teams next year, guys. I think this is going to even out. Teams are gearing up. Okay, but you give me a over on the 11.5 wins for a team that has averaged 13 wins per season since 2022, since going back to that Super Bowl. My bold fantasy prediction is that DeVonta Smith, will outscore A.J. Brown for the first time in fantasy football. You heard it here first.